Hello there, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. I'm your host, Lynnaire Johnston, and I'm a LinkedIn pro from New Zealand. Today, we are very fortunate to have with us a LinkedIn Ads pro from Utah in the United States, AJ Wilcox. Now, we are very thrilled to have AJ with us because we did try to talk with him in January, but LinkedIn called him away and we weren't able to get him on the show. And so I am very delighted that he's been able to make it here today. Now, the reason that I wanted to talk to AJ about LinkedIn advertising is this. For a long time, anybody who has heard me, seen me, watched me, or read any of my content will have seen me talk about the importance of organic reach on LinkedIn. And I would have and have for years told anybody willing to listen that you can get a business going really well, whether you're a small business, you're a solopreneur, a freelancer, whatever you might happen to be doing, you can do that via LinkedIn through the organic reach. I have said that LinkedIn ads are too expensive and they do not work. And I have fought my corner right through until today. Now, I have found that this year, particularly, organic reach of organic posts on your profile have declined. Last year, the same happened with organic reach on LinkedIn company page posts. They just plummeted. And so today I'm wanting to talk to AJ about how we can regain that reach and whether or not we need to be looking at advertising as a way of doing that. So I would like to welcome to the show AJ Wilcox, who's coming to us today from Utah. Hello, AJ, and thank you so much.
Lynnaire, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, well, it's our pleasure. Now, let me just introduce you properly. So, you're a LinkedIn Ads Pro, and you founded a company called B2Linked.com, the LinkedIn Ads Agency in 2014. Most of us were just starting on LinkedIn in 2014, so you're miles ahead of most of us. He's managed over, just wait for this, $150 million worth of spend on LinkedIn. I can't even conceive of that amount of money. Your business and LinkedIn are official partners. I imagine that is really hard to get. And you're the host of the LinkedIn Ads Show podcast. Now, I'm a great fan of podcasts, and yours has been favorited on my Spotify. And so I do hope you'll give us a bit of a mention about that while we're talking too. And also, you've managed 5 of the world's top 10 LinkedIn ads account. Now, I said you live in Utah, and according to what you've sent me, your company car is a wicked fast go-kart. Please tell us how and why you drive a go-kart, presumably not on public roads in the United States.
No, sometimes around the neighborhood, but I realized that you try to take that out on public roads, it gets a little bit dangerous. But the story was I'm an overgrown child is what it is. As a kid, I loved go-karts because I wanted anything that would get me closer to driving, even though I wasn't 16 years old. And I worked all summer long. I was delivering phone books, if any of you remember those thick things.
Oh, yeah.
I worked all summer long to earn up money for a go-kart. And I go into the dealership to go hand them the money and buy the go-kart. And the salesman tells me, "Oh, I'm so sorry. We just discontinued that model like 2 weeks ago due to safety concerns." And so my dreams of having a go-kart as a child were totally dashed. So then about, I don't know, 10 years ago, I saw a racing go-kart in our classified ads here locally. And I was like, I still want it. And so ever since then, I collected that, and I've collected a few others, and a side-by-side. I just love going fast, and especially off-road now.
Well, I think that that is lots of fun. When in an earlier life, I was an automotive marketing writer, and so I have driven go-karts in Japan. Not very
Oh,
well, let me just say, not very well. And I can't say that I really enjoyed it because it was. I think the people I was working with or were racing with were competitors, and they really took it seriously. Me, I was just poodling along. So we could talk about go-karts, but I think we probably should be talking talking about LinkedIn ads. So we're talking
Okay.
about LinkedIn ads for small businesses particularly. But I am really interested to know, AJ, why or how did you get into LinkedIn ads? I mean, you've been in it for a long time, nearly 10 years. So why did you decide to specialize in LinkedIn advertising?
Well, I didn't set out to specialize in LinkedIn. When I first started my career, I was a Google ads expert. That's what I did for my career. And I went to the last company I worked for. And on my very first day, I'm talking to the CMO. She's my new boss. And I'm laying out all of the strategy that I wanted to execute. And I remember her saying, all that sounds great. Go ahead and execute it. But just so you know, we just started a pilot with LinkedIn ads. So see what you can do. And I didn't want to look stupid to my new boss. So I saluted and said, yes, ma'am, absolutely. And walked out of her office and jumped into the platform and started trying to figure things out. But just a few weeks later, I got approached by one of our sales guys, and he pulled me aside and said, AJ, whatever you're doing, keep it up, because we're fighting over your leads. And I was curious. So I went to go look at the leads to see where they were coming from. And every single one, without fail, came from LinkedIn ads. And that was my first clue that, oh, maybe there's something more to this platform than I realize. And so I kept investing and investing. I actually grew that to become LinkedIn's largest spending account in the world over the next 2.5 years. And after that, I went, okay, there's got to be more than just this one company who can do really well on LinkedIn ads. And that's when I started the agency, so I could help as many companies as possible.
Well, I think that sounds like a really good background, and it's very similar to my own background in LinkedIn, in that once I realized there was a publishing platform, there was just no holding me back, and I was just enthused. And you and I are clearly fans of LinkedIn, which is a great thing to be, given that that's both our businesses. And it's interesting how things have taken a different direction. You've gone the ads way, and I have, as you know, always been keen on organic content. But there has been a distinct decline in the organic reach. Now, this cannot come as a surprise to anybody. It's been 5 years since Facebook made business pages something that you really had to pay for to get any kind of traction on. And so it's been very clear that LinkedIn would be heading in this direction in the longer term. But for most people, it has seemed, or most businesses, particularly smaller ones, it has always seemed to me, and the reports that I've had have always been, that it is too expensive and it doesn't work, that you do not get those kind of results. Now, clearly, as an ads expert, you are going to tell me that it does work and it's not too expensive, and I understand that. But let's demystify this for people first of all and answer that question as we go along, because I want to know exactly what kind of advertising you can do on LinkedIn with LinkedIn ads. And don't forget, I've got no experience with this. Many of our audience won't know anything about this either. So take us through it step by step. What kind of ads can you put up on LinkedIn?
Perfect. So I'll just start off by saying I'm going to be listing some costs that are associated with LinkedIn, but these are all going to be in my frame of reference in North America, which is the most competitive. So as you're thinking about running the same kind of thing in New Zealand or Australia or Europe or Asia, South America, the costs are going to be significantly less, maybe even maybe even more significantly less than what I'm saying. But I'll share with you from North American perspective. So on average, if you're targeting someone in North America, you're going to pay between $8 to $14 every time someone clicks on your ads. So let that sink in for a little bit. That is a lot of money. That's to get someone to click that they're showing a little bit of interest, but that does not mean that they're going to become a customer yet. It doesn't mean that they're going to convert with you or fill out a form. That's just that initial click. And if you compare that to all the other networks, especially Facebook and Google, that can look really expensive. Most people on Facebook or Meta in a business-to-business kind of environment, you might pay $3 to $4 per click. And on Google ads, you might pay, I mean, it's all over the board, just depending on the keyword. You might pay $1 or $2 per click on the low end, or you might pay $50 or $100 on the high end. It depends on your keyword. So I think it's helpful to talk about LinkedIn in the frame of reference of Facebook. So if we're going to pay $8 to $14 for a click on LinkedIn, where we could go get a click for $4 on Facebook. Like I'm the one who has to explain why this actually makes sense. But here's how it works. Facebook doesn't have information about who you are professionally. And so if you're trying to sell something that's like to consumers, great. Facebook is perfect for that. You can target people by their age and their interests and their activity, all of that. But if in business to business, there's only a small subsegment of people who would buy your product, with LinkedIn, we can be so laser targeted and show our ads only to them. And that's the real value, because on the front end, it's going to look more expensive. But when your sales team starts taking these leads and looking at them, what's going to happen is they're going to disqualify 95% of all the leads that you get from Facebook because they're not the right person. They're not the right end user. But on LinkedIn, because the targeting was perfect, you're only disqualifying maybe 5%. And so further in your funnel, LinkedIn ads actually starts to look really good, but it is expensive at the front end. And I won't argue with that at all.
I'm interested that it would be cheaper in some different markets. How does that work? You talked about it being competitive. And so you're talking about the words that people would be clicking on. Are you talking about the searches that are involved in this? Just don't forget that we are novices at this and need this from the ground up.
Yeah. So the way it works is you have a certain amount of advertisers out there who are wanting to target certain kinds of people. So for instance, if you wanted to target school teachers or janitors or other professions where, predominantly they're not going to have a lot of extra spending cash, or they probably don't operate huge budgets, chances are they're not going to be a very competitive audience. So you shouldn't have to pay very much to get in front of them. Versus if you're going to try to get in front of CEOs of, let's say, the Fortune 1000, then those clicks are going to be a lot more expensive because there's a lot more advertisers trying to get in front of them. So that's how the competition works, is depending on who you're trying to target, that level of competition can drive prices either higher or lower.
Right. So if you aren't trying to target something that someone that everybody else is trying to target, then it's going to be considerably cheaper. So that would seem to me to indicate that you are better off to be to niche in some way. So you might want not CEOs of the top 1,000 companies, but say CEOs of companies that make dog food in Utah, for example, and that you might be a lot more likely to have less competition, or perhaps not just Utah, but maybe say nationwide, when you niche it down a little bit. Would that be a helpful thing for people to do when they're thinking about this, is who their target audience really is?
Absolutely. And plus, when you've niched down like that, now you get control over the ability to message them differently. A dog food company owner is going to respond to language that he or she is already familiar with, versus if you just tried to use one set of messaging for all CEOs worldwide, it might fall on a lot more deaf ears.
Right. Now, when you say messaging, you're not talking about messaging as in direct messages, so a message between
Correct.
you and I. You're talking about the messaging that is in the adverts. Okay. So
Exactly.
Can you just run us through the different kinds of adverts that there are so that people can get a bit of a clue? So we see, for example, boosted or sponsored posts in our feeds, and that's clearly one thing that we often see. But what else is there? What other kinds of advertising can you do on LinkedIn?
Yeah, that's the first one I want to draw your attention to, is the ads that are in your newsfeed, because that's the default experience on both mobile and desktop. These are called sponsored content, and they can be just an image. That's actually my favorite. They can be video, or they can be a carousel that someone could flip through and see multiple images. Next favorite are over in the right rail, only when you're on desktop. These are called text ads, and you share this space with two other advertisers. So it's a little 3-pack of ads. And the reason I love these, it's going to sound counterintuitive, but it's because they hardly ever get clicked. And what I mean by that, they have a very low click-through rate. The average is about 0.025%. So that's
low.
Yeah, 2.5 clicks out of every 10,000 times these ads are shown. And they're the cheapest ad format. So when they do get clicked, it doesn't cost you very much. So I love this, especially for lower budgets, because they are a really good support to my other ads and they don't cost a whole lot. You can imagine if your prospect has been seeing your logo every time they load a page on LinkedIn, every time they visit someone's profile for weeks, by the time they see your ad, they're going to be a lot more likely to click because they feel like you're legit, like they know who you are. So I love those.
So are you saying then that they might work side by side with organic content? Is that what you were trying to say there, or did I misunderstand that?
I think they work side by side really well with both paid and organic. The difference is, I think we tend, and I'm curious to hear your reaction on this. I tend to see a lot more interaction personally than I do with my company page. And
yes,
so I would love it if the ad tools could support me personally. If I could, and this is coming in the future, but we don't have it yet, but this ability to promote or sponsor my own personal posts, I think that would be great. But right now we don't have that. We can only support a company page. So
how far away is that, do you think? Because I would love that too.
There are only 30 advertisers who are currently in the beta for that. And that betas can last varying times when LinkedIn's testing something out. But I would say we're probably 3 months to 6 months out from being able to do that.
Okay, I like that idea, but I need to stop fixating on that and move on to something else that you're saying. So let me just recap then. So we've got the sponsored posts that we see in our feeds, and we've got the text ads that are sitting on the side that really don't get much attention. And to be fair, I'm not sure that I've ever even noticed them, but I do have an odd ad blocker on, so maybe that might be it. What else is there? What other kind of advertising can people do on LinkedIn? Not that they should do it, but what is available for them to choose from?
All right, there are two more kinds. Another is also in the right rail where text ads go. These are called dynamic ads, and they're called dynamic because they take your profile picture and stick it into the ad to help get your attention. So you may have seen like, hey, Lynnaire, are you interested in working at this company? And it shows your picture. Those are called dynamic ads. And they are best used as follower ads. So getting more followers to your company page, that's where they're best used. And then finally, we have one that's actually going away. So we probably don't have to spend a whole bunch of time on it. But right now it's called sponsored messaging. And it's where you can pay to send a certain message to their InMail or to send like a conversation where it's a decision tree where someone can hit like yes or no. And then it asks them more questions. They call those conversation ads. Those are going to be replaced in probably the next 2 or 3 months, but right now they are still available.
All right, so we won't bother about them, but I am interested in this dynamic advert that you talked about and increasing your company page followers. Now, I'm always working hard with my clients to increase their company page followers. Every time we get a new connection for the head of the company, we then immediately send not only a thank you message for the connection, but also send them an invite to the company page because that, yes, thank you. But how important is it? I mean, obviously it is important. That's not actually the question. The question is, what kind of numbers does it start to really make sense to use these ads into? What kind of follower numbers I'm talking about? You know, because a lot of company pages really struggle to get their follower numbers up. And I'm hoping that the new beta testing of the messaging feature on company pages will make this so much easier. But in the meantime, we don't have that. So tell me what you feel about follower numbers in terms of making this a realistic option for people.
Yeah, I think it depends on who your audience is that you're going after. But personally, if I see an ad from a company that has less than about 1,000 followers, I start to get a little bit concerned that maybe it's a smaller company or a newer company or a fly-by-night. So I could totally see using this ad format as a way of getting your company page followers up to around 1,000 or more. And that way, as you're showing ads, your sponsored content ads will show the number of company page followers right on the ad. And so it's kind of an implicit nod of like, yeah, this company is legit. But I would say I don't recommend using follower ads if you can mobilize the people within the company, because as you know, if you're an admin on the company page, you get a certain number of invites every month to invite your connections to follow the company page. This is so much easier to get followers that way than having to pay $8 to $15 for them, you know?
Oh, I absolutely agree. And I think that it's important that people understand that their team members can do this. But I don't see that happening all that often, I must say. But it does give you then a whole huge range, a huge audience that you might not be able to reach as just one person or a couple of admins from the page. So I think that is really important. Okay, so around about a minimum of 1,000 followers, I think makes a lot of sense. All right, now then, because the organic reach of posts does seem to be declining at present, are you advising smaller companies to have a look at LinkedIn, despite the obviously high upfront costs of it? Because are we seeing ads being more effective? So that's the bit of the question I really would like you to answer, is whether they are being more effective, because in the past people have reported that they just don't work. Now there might be reasons for that you can tell us about, but do you think that they actually work for people now when they might not have in the past?
Yeah, they absolutely work, but I wouldn't say that their effectiveness is increasing or decreasing over time. I think ads are about as effective as they always have been. What seems to be changing is marketers' understanding of what it takes to capture someone. And in the past, and I've been a proponent of this as well, and I'm having to change my tune. It was like all through B2B, we had this idea that was like, oh, just get someone to download your guide or your white paper or your ebook or join your webinar. Then once you have their email address, you can reach out to them and start a sales conversation. Maybe that never worked, or maybe user behavior has changed and it used to, but it doesn't anymore. But we're finding so many people in business to business are having a really tough time getting someone into a meeting who's downloaded a piece of content. So we have to take a step back and say, all right, how do we buy? How has a brand that you've never heard of nurtured you to the point where you've then bought their product? It's a lot easier in business to consumer with these smaller deal sizes, but and you don't have a whole buyer's committee around it. But in business to business, this is really significant. And so what we found is it's repetitive touches over time, and being able to show people in the early stages how your brand is different, how you're differentiated from your competitors, and also pointing out all of your benefits to your product that they can get to try to get their attention, and really letting them take it at their own speed, at their own pace.
That makes sense to me, which then leads me on to this question. When I'm talking about organic posts, I'm quite careful to generally dial back the promo type posts and go more for value added. Do you think then that there's an argument that says that you can do more of the value added, which is educating your clients and showing them how you differ from everybody else that you've just been talking about? You can do that more and rely less on the promo post if you are doing some kind of ad campaign. Could the two work together in a way that kind of beefs them both up by doing it? Can you use them side by side in that sort of a way?
Yeah, definitely. The way that the targeting on LinkedIn works is you can target people by their job title and their geography and their industry and what company size that you want to go after. And there's like 28 different ways that you can target. Whereas organically, when we post, we're usually only getting access to I'll call it a narrow group, but it's actually quite broad. It's just sparse. So ads get us access to very specific people that we would probably never be able to get access to organically. So it's this new audience, and it's a very premium audience, which I love. So I love the concept of using them side by side to back each other up. One of the things I really like is, because I have a podcast, you have a series of LinkedIn Lives. These are subscribable kinds of events, and we can't track this stuff with ads. Usually with ads, we have something that's like, once someone takes an action, it fires something called a conversion in our analytics platform, and we get to say, oh, we paid X amount of dollars and we got a conversion, or we got so many conversions out of that. But as you know, getting people onto a LinkedIn Live isn't something that you can fire a conversion event for, or getting someone to subscribe to the podcast. I have no idea when someone subscribes. But what I do find is that when someone has listened to my podcast, after, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 episodes, they feel like they know me. And I've even had people comment that I'm some like mini celebrity to them, which is silly. But this is the kind of way that we feel with these repetitive touches from a helpful brand. So, and then we end up getting all of these leads later on of people saying, oh, I'm a listener of the podcast. I have no idea where they originally heard about us, but I do know that they're a much better lead because they've heard our content so many times. So I don't know if that answers your question properly, but I would say, like, don't be afraid to put someone to try to draw attention to the subscribable things, even if it's really hard to track, like, whether or not that's actually working right now.
I agree. And I think this all feeds back into the organic content working side by side with what you're talking about, because with newsletters, for example, on LinkedIn and company page newsletters, you can see who's subscribed, and you can then follow up with either a message or asking them to connect, whatever it is that you might happen to be. And, you know, AJ, the other thing that I always maintain, and I think I'm out on a limb on this one, to be fair, is that you have an advantage if you are direct messaging people on LinkedIn compared to if you are sending someone an email. Now, I don't know about your email inbox, but I just go through in the morning and go delete, 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 delete. Whereas with my LinkedIn inbox, I will actually read the message no matter whether I know the person or not, and just see what it is that they have to say. And then I'll decide whether to go delete or not. And I feel that there is an advantage to be doing that because you're talking directly to the person on LinkedIn. Now, I know that there is a mindset that says you should get the conversation off LinkedIn, but here's my thinking around that so much more is now being able to be done on LinkedIn. You can undertake almost an entire transaction on LinkedIn through your services page and through your company page and all of the kind of new functionality that LinkedIn is giving us. Do you think that it will be, this is not an ad question, but a general question, do you think that we'll be able to say with real definity very soon that LinkedIn messaging is better than email? I would so love to be able to say that. I mean, I know anecdotally, but really, you know, be able to prove it.
I think so. So, as I'm sure you very well know, I think it was about 4 years ago, LinkedIn, when you got an in-mail message, they used to send an email to you with the content of the message. And so I didn't even have to go to LinkedIn. I could just open the email from someone, see what it was they were asking, and then I could actually reply there, or usually I would go back to the message and talk to them. I think they cited privacy concerns or something for why they did that, but I really don't like it. I get these emails that say, so-and-so sent you a message, click here to go see what it says. It feels like a bit of a waste of my time. But what I like about this is that when you're talking to someone on LinkedIn, they're going to see the notification on LinkedIn. They're going to see the message show up in their box. Hopefully it's in their focused section of their box. They're also going to get an email saying you got a message. So it really is like a triple whammy when you're talking to someone on LinkedIn. They're being reminded constantly about the message. Whereas an email, it's so easy to just hit delete and then forget that person ever existed.
I agree, and that's why I've always maintained that it's a really good way to be able to have that one-to-one interaction with somebody that you really want to be able to reach, and you don't want them to go delete, delete, delete.
Yeah.
All right, so now then you've mentioned the different kinds of ads that are available, and so we've got the ones that sit on the side. Those are the text ads. We've got the ones that are in the feed, and we've got the dynamic ads, and the fourth one you said was being discontinued, so we won't worry about that. Is there you said that you really like the text ads because counterintuitively, they didn't get much in the way of clicks. But can you tell us then, for small businesses, what is the best format for them to start with? If they're wanting to venture into LinkedIn advertising for the first time, where should they start in terms of choosing the right kind of format to use?
I think for a small business, which usually means a very small budget, the first thing has got to be these text ads. You have all of the same targeting available to you. You could show these to the CEO of Apple if you wanted, or everything less than that. And you can bid all the way down to $2 per click. So I think this is a great place to start. It's never going to spend too much money, but very quickly you'll probably say, I've got a little bit more money and I wouldn't mind spending more than this as a budget. So I think the next part I would go is these single image sponsored content ads. And when you go through the process of setting this up the first time, LinkedIn is trying to gouge you. So be aware, do all of your targeting, but make sure you uncheck the box that they check for you that says enable audience expansion. That basically is giving them license to target whoever they want rather than just obeying the targeting that you've set forth. So uncheck that. Also down in the bidding section, this is where you get to say how you want to pay. By default, they've selected the option called maximum delivery. And just listening to the name maximum tells you that they're trying to get as much out of you as possible. That's the most expensive way to pay for traffic on LinkedIn about 90% of the time. So what you want to do is click on, it's two options below that. It says show additional options. And one of those will be manual bidding. That's what you want. When you click manual bidding, it will give you this crazy range of what they think you should be bidding per click. It might say something like, others in your industry are bidding $20 to $80 per click or something stupid like that. Ignore it altogether. Put a much lower number in there than you expect. Put something like, in North America, I like to start at $7 because you can always creep up if your ads aren't spending any money. But if you start bidding $30 per click or something like LinkedIn recommends, you're only getting one click for the day and then your whole budget's spent. So that's my recommendation, is those two ad formats to start out with.
All right. I understand that it's a relatively complex thing to do, is to do this well. You mentioned budget. So and I've heard you in the past on other podcasts and events that you've been on talk about spending $5,000, and that would be US dollars a month. Is that still the case? Is that still really the amount that a small business would have to allocate to something like this?
Yeah. And the reason why I recommend 5,000, I hope everyone's not just like shutting this off right now, but the reason why I recommend it is it's about $5,000 in spend for your results to all of a sudden become statistically significant, all the way down to some conversion event. And so if you're testing the platform, if you're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, being able to run at least one test every month where definitively you can say, yes, the audience likes this, or no, they don't like this, let's do less of that. That being said, it doesn't mean that you have to spend that $5,000 every month. You could split that over 2, 3, 4 months if you wanted. It just means that you have to exercise some patience. Lots of times I'll tell people like, hey, if you're only spending $1,500 per month, that means you got to be in this for the long run. You got to be here for 3, 4 months to make sure that you're getting enough data. And then someone checks in a month later and goes, hey, how's it going? You have to remind them like, hey, remember, we're being patient. This is going to take multiple months. But the more budget you have, the faster you can test.
All right. And Jackie's asking how long you should run a campaign for. So that works quite nicely with what you were just saying.
Yeah. Generally, I mean, we know that a buying cycle, we need multiple touches to the same person to remind them, to stay top of mind, to get their attention, and then eventually to convert. So we want this to be going for some amount of time, but realistically, once you've spent about $5,000, chances are you've reached enough of your target audience to see some results.
All right. Now, something else I've seen and heard you talk about in the past, although that may not still be the case, is that, and maybe other people have been talking about it rather than you, so I may be wrong about this, is that the item that you're selling needs to have a significant cost to it to make this worthwhile. Now, I can't remember if I've ever seen any numbers, whether it has to be, $1,000 or $5,000 per sale or whatever it might happen to be. Is that actually even true? And if so, what would you be wanting to sell at? What kind of value would you be wanting to sell something to make all this worthwhile?
Yeah. So I've talked about this quite a bit, saying that you want your lifetime value of your sale, of your prospect, to be at least $10,000. And that's because if you're paying $8 to $14 per click up front, and you obviously need a lot of clicks until you can nurture someone to become a sale, you want to make sure that you have a large enough deal size on the back end to show a return on your investment. That being said, if you are running ads in an area of the world where you don't have to pay $8 to $14 a click, let's say it's New Zealand where you might be paying 4 to 6, or South America where you might be paying 2 to 3. Obviously you can take that same value and decrease it. I'm also very aware that there are quite a few businesses who selling a product is not the goal of their advertising. We have lots of different cool things we can do with LinkedIn ads, like showing ads to the people who are already leads, but are in the consideration phase. They're deliberating with the buyer's committee and they haven't yet purchased. So you can show ads to them and the whole purchase committee to stay top of mind and to remind them to help move a deal along. You might want to show ads to members of the press in hopes that they would, someone could pick your product up and write about it. And so maybe it's more of a PR move. So there's lots of different things that you can use LinkedIn ads for. So I won't say yes, you have to have this amount. It's got to be how it works for you. But I do tend to say on LinkedIn, since you're paying more, you do want a bigger lifetime value.
All right. And that makes sense. I can quite understand why that would be the case. All right. So Tim's asking about tips for targeting personas and audience. That's an interesting one. Thanks for asking that, Tim.
Yes. Great question, Tim. So we have so many different ways of targeting audience members on LinkedIn. And so what my favorites that I tend to go for, and I think most people go for job title first off. So if you know the job title that you want to go after, you can do a job title plus geography plus company size. That's usually a really good way of getting your precise audience. But because most people use job title targeting, it becomes more expensive. It becomes more competitive. So it's helpful to try some of the other targeting methods. The other ones that I really like to use are targeting by job function, which is someone's department plus their level of seniority. So if I wanted to reach marketing managers, I could target job function of marketing and seniority of manager, and that would get me them, and it would cost less to reach them than it would to reach them by the marketing manager job titles. I also really like to target people by groups. So if you're a member of a marketing group, I can say, let's layer on a level of seniority on that too. And I can still get that same marketing manager. We also really like skills, targeting specific marketing skills, and then layer a level of seniority on there. On all of these, you can layer on a company size or a company name or a company industry or all of the above. You can't target an audience that's less than 300 people. So you want it to be big enough that you can still run the ads.
Do you need to have Sales Navigator to use LinkedIn ads well?
No, thank goodness. They're totally divorced. There was a product for a little while that LinkedIn was working on where they would let sales reps who were using Sales Navigator pass leads to be targeted by ads into LinkedIn's campaign manager. But they shut that down probably 2 years ago. So you don't have to have Sales Nav to make it work.
All right. And do you need to work with an agency if you are going to be embarking on LinkedIn ads? Or do you think that it's all right or sensible even for the average LinkedIn user to be giving this a go on their own without professional assistance? I know this is, you have a business that does, is an agency that does work on LinkedIn ads, but clearly you would be working with some very big budgets, and not everybody is going to be able to afford to come to you. And I would imagine if they did, that you would not be able to handle everybody anyway. Is it a good idea to find an agency that does, even though they are, well, I don't think they'd be competitors of yours probably, but particularly in our part of the world, but is that a good idea, or can they forge ahead and do it themselves?
Yeah, anyone can go and start an ads account and start advertising.
Should they?
That's the better question. I will say I would be betraying myself to say that they shouldn't, just because that's who I am. I'm a do-it-yourselfer. I was the guy who jumped into the platform to try to learn it and figure things out. And at the time, it was back in 2011, there weren't people who were consulting on it, so I didn't really have options. But I'm a huge fan of anyone who's going to be a self-starter and figure it out. I will say this though. I spent about $30 million on the platform before things finally started clicking. And I went, oh, I get what's happening. I get how to get lower costs and higher performance. So of course anyone can, but it's much better to work with someone who already knows what they're doing to skip that expensive learning curve up front. But yeah, anyone can. And it's totally up to you how hungry you are to learn it.
Yeah, and look, I think that's the same can be said for the rest of LinkedIn too. There are so many changes, there's so much going on the platform, that trying to navigate it all on your own is a nightmare. And I'm with you. I'm a do-it-yourselfer, of course, but I do think that it's important to use people who are experts in their field when you are doing something like this. And especially if you're spending somebody else's money, i.e. it's a company, you want to make sure that the money is being spent wisely. And I think that it is important that that people do realize that this is not an easy thing to be doing, and that it can be quite complex. I have looked at the back end of this, and it just made my eyes glaze over, AJ. I looked at it and I went, I don't think I'll be doing any further with this today. And that's as simply as far as I got with it. But we do have some clients who are using an agency for their LinkedIn ads and doing reasonably well with it. So I see this as something that has real potential, and it's going to be something that's important for people with small businesses to look at and to research. So I do want to come back to this about why people should be looking at LinkedIn ads this year in 2023, because it's a very unsure economic environment, both in your part of the world and in ours. We've had 3 years of COVID up and down. We've got the war in Ukraine. We have got all manner of uncertainty going on in all parts of the world. And so is it really a good idea for people to be taking the time now to do some research, to watch your podcast? And let's see if we can just make sure that people know what the name of the podcast is, so that I'll ask you to repeat that again so people can make sure that they listen to it. Is it a really good idea for them to be doing some research now and deciding whether or not they want to embark on LinkedIn ads, particularly while it's still relatively new, and you can make a few mistakes, you might lose a few dollars, but it's probably less of a risk now than it might be in the future when there is a very perhaps educated audience. Good luck with unpacking all of that.
Perfect.
Sorry, that did get a bit out of hand.
No, I think I got this. So thank you, Lynnaire. The podcast is called the LinkedIn Ads Show. So if you type LinkedIn ads, it's probably going to be the only podcast that pops up. That's a great one to follow. So on the question of whether or not you should really tackle this year, the same thing goes with every ads platform. The longer it goes, the higher the chances that your competitors have gotten onto the platform, and more than just gotten on, but they've figured it out and they're starting to show a return on your investment, on their investment. So the earlier you can get onto a platform and figure it out before other people, the better. And that's because the more people who join an ad platform, the more expensive it gets. When I very first started doing this back in 2011, the average cost per click was $2, and now it's $8 to $14. So it's just gotten more and more competitive as more and more people are getting on, and marketers are getting savvier. We're getting better at actually tracking the value of our ads. And so once we know, oh, we are getting deals off of this, we are getting sales qualified leads from this, now let's spend more. We can afford to bid more, and all that. So my recommendation is, yes, figure it out, even if it's at like very small, like baby steps into the arena. Get in and figure it out, because the same test next year or 2 years later could be $2 or $3 more every single click. So it's in your interest to go earlier.
All right, now that makes sense to me. Now, as we wrap this up, and I so appreciate you spending so much time with us today. Thank you so much. I want to just finally ask you whether there is something that I should have asked you about this that is important for people to know, that I simply, because I don't know enough about this to ask. Is there a question that really should have been covered in what we've talked about today?
I think we brushed on it lightly, but I just want to call it out very specifically. One of the biggest tools that you have as an advertiser, especially at small companies, on LinkedIn, we can do two really special kinds of targeting. One, we can target a list of people. And if the list of people that you want to target, you may not even know their email address, but as long as you know their first name, their last name, what company they work for, and their job title, those four things are usually enough to match them. So even if you're not planning on spending a whole lot of money, maybe you are going to upload your email list in here, or maybe you're going to upload your list of LinkedIn connections into the ad platform for targeting. There's some really cool things you can do that way with very small audiences, just to stay in front of people that may not be checking their email. Another option that's kind of opposite of this, rather than uploading lists of people, you can upload lists of companies. So imagine, think about what are the top 50 or the top 100 companies that you would best serve in your business. You can start showing ads just to them. You upload this list of companies, and then you layer on the job titles or the seniorities or the job functions on top that make sense there, and show ads just to very specific people. We call it spear phishing rather than just normal phishing. It's like going after the big deals. These are all things that you can do at very small budgets on LinkedIn.
All right, well then let's just answer this one question, if you wouldn't mind, that we've just got currently on the screen here from Beth, about whether you need to have a company page to use ads. I know the answer to this, but I want to hear you say it.
Awesome. So great question, Beth. I appreciate you asking it. The answer is, if you want to use sponsored content ads, which are the main one that I recommend, you do need to have a company page, because that's where the ads actually live on the back end. So it requires you to have one. But you don't need to have one if you're going to use those text ads, or the dynamic ads, or the message ads that we've talked about. Those are going away. But I still would suggest, and Lynnaire, I'm sure you can pipe in here, but it's really important to have a company page, even personally, because it's so awful when you look at someone and to see like where they work and you just see the little generic gray building. I think it's always worth having a company page set up, even if
I'm a convert, as you know. Michelle J. Raymond and I wrote the first book about LinkedIn company pages, and so yes, I am a convert, and I have been really from the start, AJ, because I just think that they bring so much value in so many different ways, and we did talk about that briefly at the beginning of our chat today. Now, I just want to bring up onto the screen as we wrap up this here. Now, tell us a bit about this checklist and what people will get, because I'd really love to see people download this and make use of it.
Yeah, so every time I start advertising on a new platform, I always think, oh, this is going to be so easy. And I end up spending all day on a Saturday, missing out on my kids' activities, because it's so much more complex than what I thought. So we ended up building the guide that I wish that I had when I first launched LinkedIn ads for the first time. It's a step-by-step guide for exactly how to set up a successful approach. and it's free. It's totally free. I'm not even going to ask you for your email to download it. You just go to b2linked.com/checklist and just hit download. It'll immediately download. Hopefully that gives you a giant leg up if you want to start advertising on your own. And we'd love to give that to you to help save your time.
Well, I think that is super important because a lot of these things to do with LinkedIn are extremely complex. Even these lives, for example, if you've not done a live before, it is not just a matter of getting on and clicking a button, as you know. And so having an expert at your shoulder on LinkedIn ads, I think, is extremely important. So let me just conclude by saying, if you are not yet connected to or following AJ Wilcox, then you are missing out. You need to get onto LinkedIn right now and make sure that you are doing either or both, because if you're going to be thinking about LinkedIn ads in 2023, you need to have all the help that you can get. And if you go to Spotify and look at the LinkedIn ad show that AJ puts there as well, and of course on other platforms, then that will really get you ahead of your competition. So AJ, I just want to say thank you again so much for joining us today. It's been a while getting this together, but we're very pleased that we've all stuck with it, persevered, and that you have given us such great value today. So thank you so very much indeed.
Well, Lynnaire, a huge thank you to you for having me on, and share in the background. Thanks so much for making sure this ran all smoothly. Thank you everyone who listened and asked such great questions.
Yes, indeed. The audience is always really important on any of these lives. So thank you very much indeed for sharing your questions with us. And of course, yes, acknowledging my team member Cher, who make sure that these things actually go without a hitch. So thank you, and big hugs to you, Cher. So we will be back next week on Thursday with the LinkedIn with Lynnaire audio event here on LinkedIn. And coming up on the screen in just a moment as we say goodbye will be the links to our upcoming events, and we would love to see you again. So thanks so very much for joining us, AJ. Thank you to you and the audience, and we will see you again next time. Thanks so much, and bye for now.
Bye.